What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Beyond the Wire podcast. I am your host, Tim Keller. Along with me, as he always is Mr. Matt Disher. And it's a very special week. One, because we're recording on a Friday. We messed some schedules up. We had a guest lined up for Wednesday. His thing didn't work for Wednesday, so we moved to Friday, and then something else came up. So Matt and I decided to go ahead, do it on our own again. But also, it gave Matt a couple extra days as he's been dealing with something. Matt has tested positive for the coronavirus. So Matt...
For the COVID.
Or the COVID, yes. So let's just get right into it, Matt. So let's talk about your experience. Where do you think you got the corona?
That is a great question. I couldn't tell you where I got it because I am largely not around a whole lot of other people. As is, I work from home. I don't go out into crowds of people. Maybe go to the grocery store from time to time. There were a handful of instances. I had some travel a couple weeks ago that I had to do, but I wore a mask and did all the hand. I already do a lot of hand washing anyway, so couldn't tell you where it came from. I'll tell you my experience so far. So I was on vacation last week. We were at the beach in Florida, rented a house, still remained away from most people. We weren't anywhere crowded. We weren't going to the amusement parks or anything like that. The spot where we'd set up on the beach was still very secluded. I mean, to the point where I have a photo of the empty beach that we were sitting on. It was pretty nice. So, I don't think that I had an opportunity to transmit to anybody else, beyond the immediate people that I was with. But, the experience so far has been, it's been a really bad cold with some really strange, different side effects, to include things like the loss of taste and smell, and the lingering fatigue. That was the first couple of days. It was just this horrible fatigue. Like, I didn't want to get out of bed. I was so tired, and didn't even realize I was sick at that point. I was just very tired. And so it became, quickly the sniffles and a cough, lack of flavor, lack of taste. Now, my wife will tell you that I've never had any taste. But then I remind her that we got married. And so, but at
some point you had to have taste if you married her.
Right. But, she has it. I just took my son to get tested as well. And he's been struggling with a fever for the last 24 hours or so. And so, he's feeling fine too. It's just a fever. So I had the swine flu in 2009, which laid me out in bed for a week and a half. It was probably the worst illness I've ever had. This does not compare to that. Now, I realize I realize this is a very touchy subject because COVID has been really ravishing for a lot of people. In my experience, it has not.
Yeah, this is your experience. Yes,
this is me. This is what's happening in our household. It could have been worse, could have been better, could have been worse, could have been a lot worse. And I think we're in good shape now. So it's it's very interesting because I like food and I like to taste food. And I have had
the putting of food in your face is enhanced when you taste said foods.
Right.
And those flavors, and you're like,
I keep getting excited about, like, all right, what do we want for lunch today? And then I make a sandwich and I'm like, it's really weird. I can't taste it. I forget every single time I put food in my mouth. I forget that I can't taste it.
Yeah.
So I can taste salt and sweet and things like that. I can't get any flavor. So first day, in order to try this out, my son thought this was amazing. He got a kick out of this. I took a shot of lemon juice just to see if anything would happen, and nothing. I had no effect from it.
It wasn't like bitter. You didn't.
Nothing. Wow. So then I got hot wings, like the hot wings, and I could feel them burning my throat, but I couldn't taste anything.
Okay.
So it was strange that, the odd part about the whole timing here is that I was going to get the shot. I was going to start the vaccine this week.
No.
And I'm not a holdout for any other reason other than I work from home and I'm not really around anybody, and I've just been hesitant to be laid out by a vaccine or sick for a couple of days by a vaccine, because I've heard that that's happening too.
Oh yeah.
So I don't follow the typical banter on social media about what's happening in the COVID space. We just haven't done it yet. All of that said, well, go ahead.
I was going to say my father-in-law tested positive. He took his test Saturday. He got his results Monday morning. He's been positive all week.
Mm-hmm.
They believe he believes he got it last Wednesday. He was around somebody that also tested positive. The scary thing for us was my daughter spent the night over there Friday evening before he got tested. So we had her kind of off in her room in her own little area. She did have mild symptoms. So 2 days ago, I took her to get a test. Took about 6-8 hours to get her results back. She was negative, so luckily there. But I will say that my wife has been a big fan of keeping up with everything COVID the entire time. But once her father got sick, and then she thought maybe her daughter was sick, it sent her to an extra level. So I'll be honest, maybe my wife's even watching. Was really looking forward to having another conversation other than COVID.
Yeah,
it's really been the hottest topic in my household for the past week. But it's just kind of the world we live in right now. So I'm good. I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. I hope your wife continues to do well, and hopefully, it's just like my daughter. She must have just had a cold or something was going on, but her COVID test came back negative. So hopefully that happens. Matt, you brought up the banter, the COVID banter on places like social media, on news panels, things like that. I would say overwhelmingly the majority, especially on social media, if you go to social media in general, just scroll through a timeline, or you're on a specific page that might have medical information being passed back and forth. Overwhelmingly, the majority of these COVID conversations turns into a lot of name calling, finger pointing. It's you folks that, you anti-vaxxers that are causing this. And, it's you sheep that are doing it. The finger pointing, the name calling, it does nothing. It's
division.
There's no constructive basis behind any of it. Really, it gets you nowhere. We're all sitting in rocking chairs, just rocking back and forth. It gives us something to do, but we're not making progress. I would say that if you find yourself in a chat like this, or in a string of tweets or posts on whatever social media site you're on, try to keep things constructive, productive.
This is the social media times these days.
Yeah.
It is that everybody has a voice and nobody knows how to use it. Yeah, and everybody can go be seen by hundreds or thousands of people, but nobody really knows how to convey information. And this is a fatality of COVID. Is one of those things. It's like a fatality of social media, or it exercises the downfall, or I don't even know how to explain it. The negativity of what social media can do. And what I mean by that is, if you look at during election cycles, if you look at any hot button issue that has come out, social media becomes this platform where people just go in and start finger pointing. And the problem with that is, and I tell my son this all the time, if you want people to hear things your way, or if you want to teach things to people, teach them things that they don't already know, or educate them on statistics, or educate them on prior policy, or how policy works in government, or educate on such things as vaccines and such things as illnesses and things like that. The best way to go about doing that is not by coming in and saying, Tim, you're an idiot. I hate you. I can't believe you, this, that, and the other thing. That's exactly what I always say this, like the powers that be benefit from division. I mean, it's literally the 24-hour news cycle that does that. It keep people divided by telling stories on both sides, on opposite sides. And we're doing that to each other now. And there are different reasons why people have jumped on the vaccine. There are different reasons why people have not jumped on the vaccine. I know people in healthcare that have not jumped on the vaccine for various reasons. I know people that work in pharmaceuticals. I know people that have severe allergies to other vaccines. I know people that have whatever reasons they don't want it. And I know people that have whatever reasons they did want it, and so they got it. And the point is that we are in new territory. Everybody's opinion is right. And what I mean by that is it's the same as anything else where there's not a whole lot of information or legacy information for us to go off of.
Yes.
COVID is new. COVID didn't exist to the masses a year and a half ago. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So for anybody to be like, well, we know exactly what's going to happen. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. And we're actually seeing that right now. We're seeing that even with among people with the vaccine, there's still an infection rate. Mm-hmm. And so this is all new to us. And I'm not saying that to take a side one way or the other. What I'm saying around that topic is that nobody has all of the answers, all the information. Do we think based on historical data that perhaps if 100% vaccination, if we got 100% vaccination, we would eradicate this thing? Sure. We also don't know, because then there's this other piece of the conversation that is leaning toward this thing was created in a lab and it's like weaponized and it keeps changing and it's going to keep, mm-hmm. coming up with different variants that are going to be resistant to a vaccine. I'll say at the end of the day, the nature of a virus is exactly that. A nature of a virus is to try to beat out the immune system. It's nature's way of essentially culling the herd. And I hate to say that. I know that people don't like hearing that, but that's what viruses and bacteria and things like that do. That's what infections do. They are, in short, like it's nature's way of saying, hey, there's too many of this, or it's population control, or what have you, and so it's going to find ways to change and modify. But I don't think that we're going to get anywhere as a society, as a whole population of the world. I don't think we're going to get anywhere by pointing fingers and calling each other stupid.
No, we're definitely not. We had Misty was on last week.
Yeah,
she's vaccinated. My father-in-law vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
I am personally vaccinated. Everybody in my household that is of age, is eligible. We decided to go get our vaccinations. I would say that there are people in my own household that would support mandatory vaccinations. Mm-hmm. I personally don't. I think people should be allowed to make their own decisions. Another podcast I listen to, it's a fitness podcast. These guys are all in their late 30s, early 40s, very in shape, healthy individuals. One of them actually has the coronavirus right now. He also is not vaccinated, and his explanation was I think very valid. At his age, in the shape he's in, with no other health risks or factors involved, he figured, if I would contract the virus, I'll probably be okay.
Right. And statistically, he will.
Yeah. And currently there was, at least for him, not enough information on the long-term effects of this vaccine, because mm-hmm. not only is the virus new, the vaccine itself is also extremely very new.
Right.
We don't know what's going to happen. So.
And that's the thing. I think the best way we educate each other is by presenting information, but then mm-hmm. also being accepting of if people don't want it, or if they do, to each their own. Like in my case, my parents are older. They got their vaccines. We don't spend a ton of time with them. We didn't through COVID at all. We never saw them through the lockdowns and the mm-hmm. The initial burst of this thing. But at the same time, for me, one of the reasons I didn't rush off to get it was because I work from home. I'm not really around anybody else. There's not many opportunities for me to go, if I had it, to give it to anybody else. But it's a decision people are coming to make. And, like I said, I was going to get that shot this week. I was going to start that series this week. And am I one of the late adopters? I am, not for any other reason other than I just work from home, and mm-hmm. I've just simply been, plugging away at work and losing track of time. But it's a tough situation, and there's a camp of people. There are camps of people, and this happens with any of these hot button issues, again, that are unforgiving to one another. And I think that polarizes people more and more. And and I think in some cases when people were on the fence and then they get the finger pointed at them, they probably were like, all right, never mind, I'm not even going to do it now. And it's
they dig in. They dig in even further.
Right. And that's the nature. Like Americans are, by nature, we're like a rebellious society. We were founded on rebellion. That's what mm-hmm. we are. That's why you have so many people that are like, the government's not going to tell me what to do. And fair enough, we have the freedoms to do that.
Yeah.
I think it would be different if if the world were falling apart, I don't think we've seen that. I mean, I realize that for some people in different parts of the United States, this thing has been horrible and ugly. For most people, it probably has not been. And thusly, you're not convincing most people that this is a horrible, horrible thing because it hasn't affected them. And so, and people are, again, I think we found through 2020, and with all of the events of 2020, with protesting and rioting and the different things we saw in the news, we found that people can fall in two camps. One, they don't trust their government, or two, they don't trust the media. And almost like 100% of Americans fell into one of those two buckets. They either were on the side of, I don't trust the government and the services that they're providing, or they fall on the side of, I don't trust what I'm seeing on the media. And that, in my opinion, should be more concerning to us, that people aren't trusting the sources of information and or the people that are there to serve them. We should be addressing those types of conversations.
Or you can be like myself and some other, don't trust anybody.
Right. Well, and it's really hard. I've been challenged on this too, because I am one of those that is, I'm sort of distrustful of anything that I read. And it's something that maybe my dad told me when I was a kid: believe none of what you hear and half of what you see. Yeah. And it's a good rule, because the media hasn't always been trustworthy. Information that flows around social media is not trustworthy, and we know that. And the problem that's happened with all of this is that people will pick and choose what information they deem is as appropriate. And so one person might go out to social media and be like, I don't trust anything I see here, unless it's a piece of information that agrees with what they already thought. And then they're like, well, yes, I agree with that. And that happens on all sides.
And you have to remember that social media, again, built by very smart people with these algorithms, if they realize, hey, this individual's spending, 75% of their time reading or viewing things based off of, this information, we're going to keep spitting that sort of thing into their time.
Right.
So it's going to be a rabbit hole.
Right.
At the end of the day, Matt, you brought up, the protests, things like that, the finger pointing, and with coronavirus, just be nice to each other. Just be, productive. Let's help each other out. Let's grow. Let's learn from one another. If you don't want to get a shot, don't get a shot. If you don't want to wear a mask, stay the hell away from everybody. Well, if you're going to be around people, and the store, the restaurant, the bar, the grocery store, whatever it is, says, hey, we have to wear masks, just put the damn mask on, go in, do what you want to do, get the hell out.
Oh, and a couple of things on that topic. If you have some good information to share with people, that is valid information. I don't mean this is what my neighbor Bob said, and Bob's always right about things. Valid information. That's the best way to share information, to change people's mind. If you want to change somebody's mind, present them with some really good dialogue. Don't go in there and call them names. No, everybody stops listening when people automatically start a conversation with, well, here's what so-and-so said, or whatever. I had a person the other day on social media in one of these threads. Again, I wasn't participating, but I was reading it. This person was citing news as scholarly information. It was news stories from the news, and that's not scholarly information.
Yeah.
And so they were trying to convince this group of people that were not having it that their information was right. Get the information, take whatever information you have and you need. And if that information is valid information, share it with people. Try to have a good discord. It doesn't help to be out here pointing fingers and yelling at anybody.
Yeah. Well, that's the latest and greatest on Matt. Hope you continue to get well, buddy.
It's a 20-minute conversation. Yeah. It is. It's such a hot button right now that it is worth. It's worth an ongoing conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, I can hear it in your voice. You sound a little nasally, so it's definitely affecting you. But
I think I'm on the rebound right now. So I hopefully next week we're all okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Father-in-law as well. He seems to be getting better. I actually saw him for the first time since he's tested positive today. My wife makes him meals, and she'll take him over to the house. She'll set him down on the table out back on the deck, and then he'll come up from downstairs, come outside, and he'll eat his meal. And my wife has a chair that she has probably about 20 yards away from the deck out in the yard, and they'll sit there and chat. So I went over with her today for lunch, And he said it feels like he just has this lasting hangover. It's just a hangover that won't go away.
So, yeah, that makes sense. How long's he had it?
He tested. He got his results Monday from a test he took on Saturday. So
yeah, mine felt very similar. It's kind of funny he says that, because mine felt like I was very sort of dizzy and out of it for a few days, even though my fever had gone away. I continue to sweat, and I just feel like I'm, like my head is is floating in a balloon. You know, it's kind of strange.
Yeah, I don't know. It's odd that this whole thing's been odd. It's been a weird 2 years, everybody. Really weird 2 years.
Yep.
Just I hope at some point we can get on the right side of this thing and we can put it in the rearview mirror, and 15 years down the line, we can look back and go, golly, what a nuts couple years that was.
Right. Remember that time?
Yeah. Let's get into some news. Matt and I, we decided to start a podcast. Well, here's a story about two other veterans that started a company of their own. Two naval veterans, Mark McLaughlin and Arch Watkins. They were both naval aviation veterans. They decided when they got out of the military, they were going to originally they got into the one got into finance, the other became an engineer. They kept in touch throughout the years. They got together the one night. They had a chance meeting with a Vietnam veteran who just happened to be in the distilling industry, and these two guys decided, hey, maybe that's an avenue we should pursue. So these guys decided to start a whiskey company called Old Line Whiskey. They are actually out of Baltimore, Maryland. The name Old Line gets its name from the Marylanders who fought with General George Washington back in the Revolutionary War in the Battle of Long Island. As Washington and his troops needed to withdraw back to Manhattan, hundreds of Maryland troops, nicknamed the Old Line, repeatedly assaulted thousands of British troops to give the Americans time to depart. So after the Revolutionary War, Washington dubbed Maryland the Old Line State, which still today remains as one of their nicknames. I live pretty daggone close to Baltimore. It's within an hour drive of me. I've actually never heard of this whiskey. Can't say I'm a big drinker these days either, though. I found this just to be a very interesting story. And as a veterans-based podcast, I wanted to highlight another veteran company for anybody interested out there. It's good to see veterans working together, a veteran-owned company. There's Black Rifle Coffee, veteran-owned company, Grunt Style, the apparel company out there. There's plenty of apparel companies out there, as a matter of fact, but I thought this one was good. A distillery in Baltimore, Maryland, owned and operated by veterans.
And who doesn't like whiskey? I mean, come on. Yeah. Let's just be honest. I actually saw my first Black Rifle Coffee company store in the wild in Florida last week. So
I know they've started to open up brick and mortar stores themselves. Yeah.
We just happened to drive by. I don't know if it was open yet. It looked like it was about to be open, but it had the signs up and everything like that. So, so I'm going to petition them to bring one to my part of town.
There you go. So if anybody is interested, again, it is Old Line Whiskey Company, makes single malt American whiskey in Baltimore, Maryland. You can check them out and support them very much.
They offer, what is it? They offer rum as well. Didn't I read that? They're making rum, offer 6 different whiskeys and 3 types of rum.
Oh, there you go.
And they say, all of which they say are of the highest quality. The 2 they are especially proud of is their American single malt, for which they took a master class in distilling from their Vietnam veteran friend. So that's cool. There are a handful of veteran-owned whiskey companies out there.
Okay.
And probably a reason you haven't heard of it, Tim. I mean, I think there are just a lot of companies that come and go that make their own brands, and just a matter of getting on the shelf and becoming popular, and then suddenly you'll start seeing it everywhere.
Well, that, and in my early 30s, I began to develop an allergy to the histamines and alcohol, actually. So now if I drink, I have to try to plan it out. I have to take some Benadryls. I'll take a second allergy pill for the day.
That's interesting.
And otherwise, like for the anniversary, the wife and I got a couple nights away. we were having dinner. We stopped by another place to sit down, have a cup of coffee and dessert. And I said, I'm gonna order a drink and see how I do. It had been a while since I drank, a couple years actually. And yeah, immediately took about 2-3 sips out of it. Crazy headache. The nasal passages open up and I'm starting to sniffle and the eyes start itching. It's just not worth it. So
that's amazing. I thought where you were going to go with that, honestly, just knowing you, Tim, I thought that you were going to say, like, after a couple of bottles of whiskey, I developed an allergy.
To black out and forget where I'm at, and I lose all my clothes. And
then the next day, my head is killing me.
Yeah.
That's where I thought you were going. It's weird, though, that you say that. I don't have what appears to be an allergic reaction, but I have a pretty decent bourbon collection at my house, and I don't really touch it anymore because I have found that after a drink or two, I don't feel well. And it might just be that I'm getting old, but it's not that I'm trying to, tie one on or anything. I'll have one drink and then my body's like, whoa, stop it.
Yeah.
So,
well, Matt, you knew me at a different time when, the beverages were flying around. So yeah, anybody
like water,
anybody that served with me that, anybody that was in a unit with me has seen me drink. I'll just put it that way.
No,
it was a different time. I was a much younger individual then. And yeah, the body's punishing me for those transgressions back then, I think is what it is.
Let's be honest. Marines don't drink. We never did any drinking in the Marines.
No, not at all.
This was the branch that was started in a bar, and I always loved it going to the birthday ball every year, and they'd be like, "Listen, if you're under 21, you're not drinking." But then they'd be serving drinks to like literally everybody, and I'm like, "So are you telling us we shouldn't be doing this, but you're allowing us to?" Or
I was gonna say, I won't say what unit I was with. Yeah, I went to a ball. They made that same announcement. I literally walked past my captain, my first sergeant, their table. Held up the 2 drinks I was leaving the bar with. Cheers. They look back at me. Cheers.
Right.
Slammed one down. It's the birthday, whatever.
Yeah,
things happen.
It's like built into the culture. Like they say don't do it, but then go ahead.
Don't get arrested. Don't do nothing stupid.
Right.
I will also say that post 9/11, coming back from Egypt, we landed in Maine. We're in our camo in a civilian airport in Maine. I remember that the Raiders and Broncos were playing on Monday Night Football. We, as we should have, we all went to the airport bar while we were waiting on the plane to refuel or whatever it was doing. And they said, "We're back in the States. Can't nobody underage." I walked straight to the bar, ordered. They never asked me for a thing. I was like, Awesome. So,
Yep.
Yeah. Let's talk about a little bit of professionalism. Let's talk about a little bit of job seeking. It's really what the whole basis behind this podcast is supposed to be. Well, we found an article here. Matt actually brought this one up, and it's a great article. 6 items that are no longer needed on your resume. Again, all these are pulled from military.com if you want to read them yourself. But the first one is here, references or references to your references. There was a time where almost any resume would include either outright listing professional references or mentioning the possibility of references if the employer wanted to hear from your old bosses or colleagues. I'll be honest, it's been a few years since I've had to put together a resume, but on my last resume, I said references available if needed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go ahead and list them, but apparently these are not needed at all anymore.
And this is the thing. What is happening these days is with the advent of modern technology and the third-party services and things like that, is that companies are not like the manager. Anybody would still do this at small companies when you apply for a job. But if I receive a resume and I'm going to interview a candidate and then go ahead and bring them through the process and hire them, we are hiring a third-party company to do a background check and reference checks. A couple of things within that. The background check is obviously really good for compliance and like legal reasons. You want to make sure you're not hiring somebody who has, stabbed 4 people in their last 6 jobs. You know what I mean? Because then what can happen is, well, why didn't we know that Bob Smith was, stabbing people in the office? So there's that piece that you have to get through. The references, are you going to put down somebody who is not going to be a good reference? No.
Exactly. So, that's what this brings up is
yeah,
any reference listed or that's going to be provided is going to be somebody that's going to give you a decent review.
Right. I'm not going to be honest. And like I had a boss a few years back that I would never use as a reference ever, because we simply did not see eye to eye. And the program that I was in and the company that I was in was it was a disaster. And it was one of those things where I would not ever talk about my experience there, nor would I use a single person from that business to reference that. So that's one point. But secondly, when the background check company goes to run those references, they're going to ask for those anyway. They're not going to look on your resume and be like, oh, Matt Disher put down Tim Keller. It doesn't matter. What they're going to do is ask for some immediate references and how you know this person, how you work with them. And that company's going to call that person directly and just say, we're evaluating Matt for this position. Can you tell us a little bit about your interaction? And really what they do is they put them on the spot and they ask them questions. And I've done references like this before where companies call me and say, why'd this person only stick around in this job for a year or 6 months or whatever? And I'll explain to them, here's what happened. Here's what's going on. This person would be great for this type of role and not for that type of role. But the third party does that anymore. Nobody's doing that off of a resume anymore.
Okay. So number 2, unnecessary details. No employer needs to know your address until you're being onboarded. They don't need to know your hobbies, college GPA. These things are all relics of a bygone era when, Matt has a position listed for, I know, Matt, you were looking to hire somebody to run the SkillBridge side of things for you. I don't know officially how it all went down, but if this was 20 years ago, you would have had a pile of resumes on your desk to sort through.
Right.
And you personally would have had to look through them.
Right.
I know nowadays there are algorithms and computer systems that the resumes get submitted electronically. The system essentially is combing through them for certain keywords and skills listed. And then they take, hey, this is the top 10, 20%. Now the individual can start to look at them. It does say that if one of your hobbies necessarily might have something to do with the position you're applying for, that lists that as a skill. So if Matt and I decided, hey, we want to be radio DJs and we're applying to a radio station, list, hey, podcast host, so many years, boom, as a skill.
Yep. So. Yeah, and I think unnecessary details can also be things like, and I've seen this on resumes where people are like, well, I volunteered for, or I am in the local political club. That's great. I realize it's volunteerism. The problem is that those types of things, while nobody's supposed to discriminate against you on those things, that's unnecessary information. If it's not vital to the job, assume that it could be used against you. And again, we like to say that companies should not be making decisions based on those types of things, but hiring managers do make those decisions. If a hiring manager looks at a resume and somebody's like, hey, my best hobby, and I spend 60 hours a week doing this, is like driving around in the middle of the desert on my four-wheeler, I have to make the assumption as a hiring manager, I'm like, well, then when are you going to have time to work? Like, don't put those things down. The other piece of this is unnecessary, the opposite of unnecessary details. Look at the job description, enter your resume items and details based on what that job description is asking for. If it's not in the job description, if they're not asking for it, then just don't start adding more stuff to your resume.
Yeah.
You don't need more stuff. You need less.
Yep. No filler needed. Number 3, objective statements. The objective of applying to any job is to secure an interview and to get the job to further your career. If your resume details a history of working in an industry or sector, the objective of rising within that industry is also pretty clear. So it's saying, again, what Matt kind of just said, no need for any of this filler. Once the computer or the algorithm filters out the unqualified candidates and that resume is now in front of the individual that's going to be doing the hiring, they're not going to want to read, why you're looking to build your future necessarily. They're going to want to look at your skills and how you would fit this job that they're hiring for.
And the general rule of thumb for the size of your resume is no greater than 2 pages. I always tell people, if you can, make it 1.5 pages. If you absolutely can, if you're early enough in your career, try to keep it down to 1 page. The reason for this is that recruiters, hiring managers, there's a rule that says they look at the resume for 6 to 10 seconds or something like that. It's absolutely true. They want to be able to see in the first couple of pieces of that page, the first half of that page, they want to see that this person has the basic qualifications for this job before they say, it's typically like an initial screen through. They're going, I have 100 resumes. I'm going to pull out the top 20. They want to be able to look at it really quickly and say, here's the person that I need. Your objective statement, you could go in there and say, hey, I really want to wrangle unicorns and I like underwater basket weaving. And then when I go through the skills on your resume, it has nothing to do with unicorn wrangler or underwater basket weaving. Mm-hmm. And so your objective statement doesn't mean anything as much as your skills, or even better, the relevant experience to that job. How many widgets have you produced? How much money have you produced? How long mm-hmm. have you been doing this? What makes you the best candidate for this job?
Absolutely. Non-applicable skills is number 4. So according to the article, there was a time when employers found the jack of all trades kind of employee as an attractive asset. Those days are long gone. Much like, I'll bring it back to sports, much like sports teams, they are looking for specialists. They are looking for people to do specific jobs. They don't need a wide receiver that's also going to play quarterback and that's also going to kick the ball. Like they got a kicker, they have a quarterback. They don't need somebody else to do all this. They want the best receiver out there. So if you're applying to be a jet mechanic, they're looking for the best jet mechanic out there. They're not looking for a jet mechanic who is also a motorcycle mechanic, who is also a boat captain. And guess what? He can be an electrician if need be. They're looking for somebody to be the best jet mechanic out there.
And it goes back to number 2, again, unnecessary details. Mm-hmm. This is the same type of thing. Put details on your resume that are relevant to the job description, to the job posting, to the job description inside of that job posting. Don't offer up a whole bunch of other stuff that's completely irrelevant.
Well, number 5, Matt, you just mentioned it, a relevant experience. While you may be tempted to show you have a long work history and the ability to hold down a job for more than 2 years at a time, the employer will assume this to be the case unless your resume shows otherwise, and there's nothing you can do about that. So again, if I'm applying to, I'll just keep using this jet mechanic. If I'm applying to be a jet mechanic, I've worked for a smaller, jet manufacturing or, whatever place for the past couple of years. I don't need to list, I worked at Panera Bread when I first mm-hmm. got out of high school. Like, that has nothing to do with the job I'm getting ready to apply for.
Yeah.
If we were both combat engineers. Matt, does any of the skills you used as a combat engineer in your day-to-day tasks as a combat engineer, does that really translate to what you do now? There's the small group leadership, the team building, things like that.
When I get stuck in my office and the door won't open and I put a door charge on it and blow through the door, that's completely irrelevant.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, I
mean, we have a master key. We could have got you out.
Right. Why didn't you just knock?
Yeah.
I think the other piece of this is back to your jet mechanic thing. If somebody's been working on 4-wheelers in their own garage for 10 years and then they submit their application to this job, and they're like, well, I haven't been working on a jet engine, mm-hmm. but I have been working on 4-wheelers in my garage for 10 years. That's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. A jet engine is not a 4-wheeler.
Unless you're applying for a small engine place.
Right,
that's
of course.
Going to work on
of course.
dirt bikes.
Yep.
That experience is irrelevant experience.
Right. 100%.
And then last but not least, number 6 is photos of yourself. Let's be honest. We're all not that pretty. No.
I mean, we are, but
some resume gurus swore by photos on resumes for a time. That time has passed, if it existed at all. There are some laws and policies in place that require employers to toss resumes with photos right away for fear of violating equal opportunity laws. I can understand that if we're all applying photographs to our resumes. It's just going to put them in a bad spot. Matt and I both put our resumes in along with the other 100 people that put in resumes to a specific job. Matt and I, white male, they're going to see that immediately and be like, hey, we really want to diversify. We can't really hire another white male. And it would stink to have that happen, to have our resumes just thrown in the trash because, man, we have an office of people who look just like these two guys.
Right.
Both of us could be very qualified. Matt could be the greatest candidate they've ever seen for this position, but immediately his resume gets tossed out.
Yep.
Same thing. Females.
It is
minorities.
Yeah, it's biases and discrimination, mm-hmm. and discrimination is the biggest, like the legal glaring item here too. But then people also, everybody, I don't care who you are, you have biases.
Yeah,
and I don't mean biases to racial or ethnicity or gender or anything like that. I mean, just general biases. And I'll give you an example of this, a great example of this. I received a real resume for a sales position many years ago as a very young recruiter. And I was on a recruiting team of a whole bunch of other young recruiters. And when I say young, we were in our, the youngest was probably like 21. Some of these people hadn't even graduated college yet, and they were working on this recruiting team with me. And I was probably in my late 20s at this point in time. And we received a resume, and the resume was fairly well written, but it had this gigantic picture of a dude wearing a trench coat and a cowboy hat standing next to some farm equipment. And as young recruiters, sure, the job description, or rather this candidate's work experience may have been in line with what we needed. But when I talk about biases, it suddenly gave everybody a laugh. Nobody could take this candidate seriously now because he was dressed like a character out of a movie. And it was this photoshopped dark, black and white background and things like that. But that's a great example of, and I'm not saying everybody does this, photos remain off of your resume. But I do distinctly remember receiving this one resume through email, and we all had a good laugh. And I don't think the candidate ever got moved forward because, and it wasn't my candidate to interview, but it was because everybody had their own biases, and we were like, we just can't take this person seriously for an outside sales job.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that is the 6 things that are no longer needed on your resume. You can check that out on military.com. And lastly, Matt, you sent this to me last week when we were off, but you wanted to make sure we brought it up on the podcast. We've talked about, some of the best movies that depict war that Hollywood's done. This one a little more specific. The 3 most realistic firefights ever filmed by Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you don't know, when we say firefight, we don't mean like a firefighter putting water on a fire. We mean, guns and violence, quick, fast action. So the 3 that they have listed in this article, number 1 is Delta's Time to Shine in Sicario. The border scene in 2015 Sicario is worthy of study from multiple angles as an exercise in filmmaking. This scene puts on a clinic and tension building, and although there are some elements of the circumstances may not be entirely realistic, the way in which the ensuing firefight plays out offers a concise and brutal introduction to the capabilities boasted by the sorts of men that find their way onto an elite team like the Delta team that is in Sicario. So yeah, this scene, it's the action itself is kind of quick. It's, these guys, they don't talk a lot. They're all about the action. There are operators that are sent there for a very specific reason because they're very good at what they do. So it says here, the tense lead up and rapid conclusion leaves the viewer with the same sense of continued stress even after the shooting stops that anyone that has ever been in a fight can relate to. So yeah, there's the build up, there's the tension, the quick release. And then you're like, dang, that was it? Oh, man.
See, I love Sicario. I love the follow-up to Sicario, Day of Soldado, I think is what it's called, if I'm saying that right. So both of those movies are just exceptionally gritty and, I don't want to say dark, but like you're on the edge of your seat the entire time because they're dealing with drug dealers and cartels and things like that. Like they're dealing with these very dangerous groups, and they're kind of crossing borders and doing all this stuff, and everybody's trying to kill each other. The one thing I'll say about all 3 of these as we go through them is that they are realistic from a standpoint of the way that people shoot and move and communicate. It's ideal in a training situation. The one thing that I will say about all of them is that they are all unrealistic in terms of it does not capture the sheer terror and fear of what happens during these types of events. So like Sicario does a really good job when they're stuck in traffic and these dudes jump out of their cars and like they start having a little bit of gunfight. It's almost like everybody involved is way too cool, like way too level-headed. There are, there's the girl, I cannot remember the actress's name. She's stuck in the car and she ends up having to shoot a bad guy, but she's terrified. So you're getting the fear from her. She's terrified because she's not used to this kind of stuff. She's like a criminal analyst for the FBI or something. She's not used to gunfights. And the other guys are like Delta operators. And so they're probably used to getting in gunfights. It's second nature to them. But the one thing that I feel it doesn't capture in Sicario is that there's no fear and terror of the situation. They just go out there and like They're like, don't do it, don't do it. Bang, 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 bang. A couple of guys drop, and then they're like, all right, let's go. It's kind of like, it's fairly realistic from the grittiness standpoint, but then everybody just kind of bailed out and got in their vehicles and left.
And I'm going to skip over the one in the middle. We'll save that one for the end. We'll go to the third one here.
Yeah.
As fast and as quick as Sicario was, this next one is a 10-minute scene.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody loves this scene in Heat, the movie Heat. The dramatic 10-minute shootout in Heat has become legendary in Hollywood for good reasons. For 6 weeks, the film's production crew closed down parts of downtown LA every Saturday and Sunday to turn the city into a war zone. The actors came prepared to do their parts. Production actually brought in real British SAS operatives to train the actors in real combat tactics at the nearby LA County Sheriff's combat shooting ranges. So now this is where the scene then, becomes, kind of that legend is supposedly this scene, and Val Kilmer took to the training so well that the shot of him lying down fire in multiple directions and reloading his weapon without the scene cutting. So it's a one-cut thing. You actually see Val Kilmer do this. It has been shown at Fort Bragg as part of the training for American Green Berets and at Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego for Marines that are in training. It's first off, great movie, great scene. Yeah. And they did a great job of training these actors to make it look as real as possible. So, they show it to the Marines in San Diego for the depiction of how to effectively retreat under fire. As one person's laying down the cover fire, you're up, you're moving, you're down,
right,
back and forth. And they do that very well in this scene.
So this movie was made in 1995. This was one of my favorite movies when I saw it the first time I saw it. And I think I own it somewhere on DVD, even though nobody has a DVD player anymore.
Yeah.
But I would say arguably this shootout scene, it sounds right. It sounds how it sounds when gunfire is erupting in buildings, around buildings. They are running down the city streets. The cars come to a screeching halt in the middle of the street. People are running in every direction, screaming. It's utter chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So they got that right from that realistic standpoint. The thing about if you haven't seen the movie, the thing about the shootout is like they're literally just like running, like bounding down the street, which is kind of weird to me because you'd think like in order to get cover, you probably would have gone into a building or gone through an alleyway or something.
Yeah. These
dudes are bounding down the street and the cops are chasing them, and there's all the uniformed police blocking the road. And like, it's kind of cool because there are rounds impacting windshields and glass, and it's like, glass spraying everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever they hired to do their combat scenes, like the advisor, maybe it was Dale Dye, who knows? We talked about Dale Dye once. Whoever they hired to be their like military or gunfight advisor knew what they were doing, because it is a fairly realistic. It's still Hollywood, but you capture the fear and the terror, and people are trying to hide behind things, and the cops are taking cover, and the bad guys are taking cover, and they're running out of bullets in their guns and having to change magazines in the middle of a gunfight. And it shows the clunky nature of trying to like have a gunfight in the middle of a street, which of course we can all relate to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. At least twice a week. I like to keep my skills sharp.
Right.
And this one, and the article hits it right on the head. It is the gold standard. Matt, you talked about Sicario doesn't necessarily show the fear or the terror in the operators themselves. Heat does a little bit better a job of that. But if you want to watch actors portraying military members and see terror, agony, fear, this scene does it so well. The opening scene to Saving Private Ryan, when they're taking the beach or trying to take the beach, hits all of those things. It is dirty, dark, gritty. It is an overload, a sensory overload.
Right.
Bullets whizzing by, explosions going off, the sand and the dirt flying in the air, getting in your eyes, covering your face. It's hard to breathe. You don't know, in 3 seconds, I could be gone from this world.
Right.
So the author of the article has a great paragraph to start it off, and I think it's fantastic to show how true to life this scene itself is. When Saving Private Ryan premiered in 1998, I distinctly recall my parents returning home early from their long-planned date night. My father, a Vietnam veteran who had long struggled with elements of his service, had been excited to see the new Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg wartime epic, but found the opening scene depicting the graphic reality of Normandy invasion of World War II to be just too realistic to handle. My dad, who had never spoke of his time deployed, chose to leave the theater and spent the rest of his night sitting quietly in his room. So an individual who had, quietly struggled with their time serving over in Vietnam, went to the theater, was excited to see this movie. And that first opening scene was so realistic, it took that individual back to a place they never wanted to be again. And hopefully they got through this evening fine. But yeah, this scene, especially for combat engineers, you see the Bangalore torpedoes, the engineers make the way for everybody else to get through to hopefully get up there, take those machine gun bunkers out. This scene never, ever have been in a firefight, never, ever have had to storm a beach. This scene right here, I can say watching it does raise a level of anxiety inside me. Mm-hmm. I know that at this point in my life, I'll never, ever have to do those things. Right. But at some point in my life, I put myself in a position where I could have possibly had to do those things. And still to today, if I watch this scene, my anxiety will start to tick up because I've trained to do those things. I know what it could possibly be like. And that is so real to me.
Well, and to that point that you just made, it is, I think the realization for me is that people actually did this. And that, when we're in training in the Marine Corps, for example, and real people have done this beyond, World War II. It happens all the time, charging machine gun nests. And, that's the thing we always joked around about in training or in boot camp or in, anything. It was like, all right, if there's bad guys in there, we got to go get them. We're going to have to charge that gun. Well, these dudes were charging that gun. Whether or not they knew what they were going to face when those ramps dropped in those beaches, real people did this in real life. And I think that that's what makes it so realistic or so anxiety inducing for me is that, I get the fear of the reality that you might be facing down people trying to kill you, but then taking a step further, somebody then depicted this in a realistic setting. This is something that actually happened, and hundreds of thousands of Allied troops invaded that beach that day and came face to face with some of those machine gun nests. And, they were well dug in and well prepared. If you read, I've read books on the preparation of Fortress Europe, and there were just everything was covered. It was just over, the Allied forces just sheerly overwhelmed them. But so many of these people made it on that beach. I had heard when that movie came out, a lot of people that actually served in D-Day that made that invasion themselves, that were unaware of this movie coming out, went and saw it and they recalled events and details of their own invasion that they had forgotten because the movie so realistically depicted it.
Yeah, they had blocked it out, or I'm sure some of them didn't block it out. Most of them probably had. They decided that this is not something I want to relive over and over. But for some of them, just time had passed where they'd forgotten things. And it's they say music can take you back to a certain place in time. I know that there are songs that are from a certain era of my life where when I hear it, wow, I remember hearing this song for the first time, or I remember riding in the car, going to the beach, and this song came, things like that. Smells do it too. Mm-hmm. But scenes like this, there's not a smell involved, but the sounds, the sights, you can start to smell, you can start to feel, you can feel that fear building up. You can feel that adrenaline, that terror. This author of this article lists that his father at some point did make it through the scene. He watched it at home. Maybe the theater, that surround sound, the explosions going off. They do such a great job with these films and the sound. It almost vibrates you inside those theaters. You can almost feel the explosions. So maybe that had to do something with this individual's father not being able to make it through. He did get to watch this scene. He made it through. But a number of actual veterans, as well as, people that were there, have had issues with this opening scene just being too realistic.
Right. I would say if you enjoyed that movie and you haven't seen the series The Pacific or Band of Brothers, both also produced by the same group of people,
yeah.
Spielberg and Hanks and those guys. They're also, it's like, I mean, Band of Brothers and in the Pacific are 10 episode series of more combat and situations like this. It's not all combat. It's not like, 10 hours of combat, but it does show a number of different situations, the Marines in the Pacific. And yep. Another movie that probably should have gotten an honorable mention on here was Blackhawk Down. I always thought that was a really well-made one too. Handful of Army Rangers are stuck inside of Mogadishu, and it's just, again, utter chaos. It just shows they get separated, their communications go down, they're having trouble communicating and moving in the right direction. They're out of supplies, they're running out of ammo, people are getting hurt. It's a very realistic experience, I guess, as realistic as it can get for a movie.
Well, you brought up Dale Dye earlier in this conversation. Dale Dye is one of the people that also happened to work on Saving Private Ryan. Mm-hmm. It seems like Mr. Hanks and Dale Dye have teamed up to do another one. This is going to be called No Better Place to Die. It tells the true story of a small group of paratroopers operating behind enemy lines during Mission Boston. Yep. This was a mission that the U.S. Army's 82nd All-American Airborne Division had dealt with back in World War II. So, they're teaming up to do it again. Dye is the best in the business at getting these actors to portray these scenes, as amazingly as possible. So,
yep.
Yeah. But we have almost hit that hour mark. Matt, again, I want to say, I hope you continue to get better. I hope everybody in your family does well. And anybody out there that is dealing with the same things, get better, take care of yourself, do well. As we always like to let you know, you can find us on all the major social media platforms. You can find us on all major podcast platforms. We'd appreciate a review, a like, a subscribe. Check us out. Let us know how we're doing. It also helps us with those algorithms that got brought up a few times. It gets us in front of other individuals that might enjoy some of this content as well. So appreciate all that. Thank you, folks, very much for checking us out and tuning in. And until next week, we'll be right back here